she is.
Hey. Hi.
Hey, let's see. We're going live. Everyone, hi.
Hey. I didn't leave you hanging like sometimes.
No, you were amazing. That beginning of inviting different people can lag a little, so that was awesome.
Yep.
Well, I'm Alexis Tandy with the WHIP SB, and right now we have Laura Capps, Santa Barbara Unified School Board member and the founder of Capstone, and she's also the CEO. She's a power player in this town. So welcome, Laura. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's great I just love what you're doing. It's fun to participate too.
Cool, cool. Well, why don't we begin and have you explain a little bit about yourself. Tell us who you are, how you're involved with local politics, and how
Sure.
you're involved overall in the whole area.
Yeah, let's see. I'm a Santa Barbara kid, born and raised here, in Santa Barbara. Went to our public schools and had the fortune of going on to Berkeley, and then had a career in Washington, D.C., working in the Senate and the White House and on presidential campaign all over the country. But I always knew I wanted to come back to Santa Barbara whenever you sort of end up, and whatever that is. And so for me, that was about almost 10 years ago now. When my son was born in DC, I just knew that, sorry for my dogs are chiming in here. I just knew that Santa Barbara was the place that I wanted to raise him and come back, and really did kind of a 180 career-wise, from going from national politics to really going local here, which I know is the ethos of the WHIP, and getting involved in a lot of nonprofits on the local level, and then deciding to run for school board. So I still, because a lot of people don't know this, the school board is basically non-paid. So it's you do get some stipend, but it's not a full-time job by any means. And so my day job, I run my own public affairs business called Capstone, which is at lauracapps.com. So that's kind of it. I mean, I'm a mom to a 10-year-old. That's the number one thing. I'm very close with my mother and my family, many of whom live here in Santa Barbara and also the Bay Area. So, and I love dogs, and unfortunately they're chiming in right now. I thought they'd be quiet, but that's the way it goes.
Way because
well, if I put mine away, then they scratch on the door and it's almost louder. So there's no good answer, but here they are.
No. Well, let's begin there with the school board.
Yeah.
That is kind of been front and center with COVID, with everything else that's been happening. You were one of the very first voices advocating for a vaccine mandate. You were before Gavin Newsom. You were before City College after they voted 2 times, not third time's charm. How did you come to that idea to advocate first and lead the way in Santa Barbara?
By following the science and understanding the layers of protection. There's basically 5 main layers, and vaccines are by far the strongest layer, especially with Delta, even though we are seeing these breakthrough cases. But and so really in conversation with my colleague, president of the board, Kate Ford, who's just a powerhouse and has so much experience, 40-year educator, we thought we got to do something. When we got this initial results that only about 60% of our staff, teachers and staff, had said that they were vaccinated, that just set off alarm bells for me, knowing that all of these unvaccinated children would be coming back to school in a few weeks. So we knew we had to give our staff and teachers as much time as possible. And it turns out the time was helpful, because a lot, they're on summer break, and a lot of it, we went from sort of 63% to 80-some% within a week or two. So a lot of people just hadn't uploaded their card. And so, that was reassuring to know. But vaccines, I am clear as a bell on vaccines. That is the strongest layer of protection. And we just need to be doing all we can as government leaders, as elected leaders, to make sure that our, taxpayer funded employees are playing by the, what we know is the safest way to keep our kids safe. And right now, Delta is targeting our children. That's where this disease, this variant is targeting the unvaccinated, and those, as you well know, under 12 can't get that yet. And a lot of them over 12 haven't yet, so they should. So just focusing on vaccines has been a real passion of mine.
So tell me what's going on inside your head, because I was watching the school board meeting,
Yeah.
and comment after comment,
Yeah.
scathing, accusatory, negative. What is going through your head while you are listening to comments like this? Cool.
Yeah, it's really sad. A lot of those voices, especially the one you might have watched about 3 weeks ago, it got pretty rabid. The cops actually had to come, and a lot of the speakers, I could tell, well, just by their comments, they weren't necessarily even connected to schools. Some were. There's definitely those voices that are important. We have to listen to all the voices, but at this stage, when things are, how many months are we into this? 18 months. And I believe our kids are suffering, bearing the brunt of this pandemic. I just would rather not hear anger, even if you have a different opinion about the science. It's hard for me to understand how you would, but I respect those that take a thoughtful approach. We need to bring the temperature down, because kids pick up on that too. Kids are learning right now how to cope with tragedy, how to cope with loss, how to cope potentially with a death in their family from COVID or an illness or a parent that's out of work. And so the more we can, try to muscle up any kind of resilience and strength for them to see, the better that they'll fare. That's really how I feel about it. But I know, I'm surprised by the reaction, the temperature of the reaction, but I'm not necessarily surprised that there is a very small group of activists that sort of make their way from each entity, each meeting.
What do you think about the county meeting, the county supervisor meeting? They're just yesterday. What do you think is taking so long? Why aren't our local leaders taking a more proactive approach with the science behind them?
I mean, there's a lot of factors, I know, but again, just on when it comes to vaccinations, I am clear as a bell that we need to be as proactive. And I've said that meeting after meeting. I want us to be forward thinking. I don't want us to come kind of behind on this one. The science is so clear. This vaccine is doing such an amazing job. 4 billion plus people have taken it. So when people say, oh, it hasn't been tested, et cetera, but 4 billion people. And I just know, looking at the research, and I do a lot of research myself, as does Kate Ford and as do other of my colleagues. Polio we'd still have polio in our schools right now if it weren't for the vaccine. And finally, Jonas Salk came up with a vaccine in 1954. And where did he first administer it? In a public school outside of Pittsburgh, because he wanted to send the signal, this is what our children need. And they did. Back then, paralysis of your child was the biggest concern that parents had. And now there's not one case of polio. So it's just clear. And I think that government employees have an obligation to be vaccinated. I think anyone working with children has an obligation to be vaccinated. I think healthcare workers have an obligation to be vaccinated. I think that if I found out that a private business in town, like a restaurant, was proud of everybody was vaccinated, I would want to patronize that service. So I just think the more that we can be putting on, we've tried the carrots for a long time now, since this vaccine's been available, almost, really about 10 months since December, but for the general public freely since about June. And we've done a lot of incentives. Beer and money and all this stuff. But I think now, unfortunately, I wish it weren't so, but that's when government has to come in and provide some requirements. And it takes leadership, and you just know you're going to get the pushback, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. It's called public health. You also don't get to drive drunk in our town, in our community, in our county. You don't get to do that. There are limits to what it means to be in a society, and that we're public health. My mom is a public health nurse, so I grew up really with this orientation and this ethos to the way we all need to live together.
One of the things that we do here at the WIP is we try to meet everyone where they are, and not everybody has the terminology. Right. How local government works. One of the terms that we often hear bounced around is the Brown Act. Yep. Can you explain what it is and why it's important?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I come from most of my career has been in the legislature in Washington and working in the White House. And there's no Brown Act that takes that has protocols over federal or even state government. It's really local here in California, and I found it super frustrating, especially when I first joined the board, because I just didn't understand what it means. But essentially, if I could describe it in a nutshell, and it's for the sake of transparency, no more than 2 board members can't meet to talk about a policy that will be upcoming on the agenda or at any point. So that means that when you see us in that meeting, we've never discussed this topic as a group. We might have one-on-one conversations, like I might talk to Virginia Alvarez, or I might talk to Rose Munoz or Wendy Sims Moten individually about a policy, but we have not come to any kind of consensus or really even been able to ask each other questions prior. And there's a lot of downsides. I get the transparency, and I'm pro, transparent government and people understanding what's happening. But the downside is, I think, especially during COVID, a lot of people were tuning into local government for the first time, which is great. Last summer, I presided over a school board meeting on Zoom with 900 people. But unfortunately, just one factor of the Brown Act means that we kind of look like we don't know what we're doing. I mean, just to be real with you, because again, I'm used to when you go out in public and you present a hearing in the United States Senate, you've figured out, okay, Senator Murray is going to talk about that point, Senator Klobuchar is going to talk about that point. It's somewhat orchestrated to some degree. And then the questions, they've had a chance to kind of figure out where things are going. Certainly there's elements of surprise, but as a result, just one factor of the Brown Act is you're really seeing it in real time, which is good and bad, because I had some parents be like, why did you guys, you were asking all these basic questions? And it's like, well, that's actually the first time we could legally ask those questions as a group and benefit from the answers as a group. Does that make sense?
It does. I guess I'm confused. So when have board members made up their mind on how they're going to vote on different agenda items before?
No, I mean, certainly we prepare for the meeting. So we get the agenda when everybody else does, except for the board president, who helps put the agenda together. And that then posts on Friday, usually by Friday evening. It has to post by Saturday morning. And so that's when the rest of the board gets it as well. And we have the weekend and Monday to really prep and ask the staff questions, that's for sure. But no, I often don't know necessarily how I'm going to vote on action items. And I've heard you talk about this. I love, you're right that public comment often doesn't necessarily flip, but it certainly brings new information to light or raises issues that we haven't been privy to, because we're not in a day-to-day operational function as a board. I don't work at the school system all day long. I'm not in staff meetings. I'm not hearing about the problems with the parking lot at San Marcos until parents bring that forward. And that constituent piece is really a wonderful aspect of local government, because it really matters. I mean, if one person emails me, I'm just using this example about the parking lot problems at San Marcos, because we're putting in solar panels, which is something I pushed for years. One parent emails, that's interesting, and we take note of that, but then 10, 12, 20 do, then we start to figure out, okay, what's happening here? And oftentimes public comment is just the most efficient way for a member of the public to reach us all, especially now. We can reach all of you to send a bunch of emails and do a bunch of meetings. So I really value the new items that get brought to light in public comments, and certainly sometimes my mind has changed, or I'm informed about something, or more often it's something to act on in a future meeting when we can put it on the agenda.
Well, thanks for addressing that. That's, I'm learning, just like everybody else in Santa Barbara, why the WIP exists. And so I appreciate you giving clarity to that's really good for people to know.
Yeah, and often I'll just say one more piece. I mean, sometimes we often find out, like, let's say sex ed for example. So we passed a new curriculum last year. And certainly I didn't agree with those who were vehemently opposed to it, but they did raise legitimate issues about not having been involved in the sharing of the curriculum, and they raised valid points about how they hadn't had a chance to see it because of COVID. And so we went back and we made more opportunities for that curriculum to be shared. So things like that, where again, I fully supported what we're doing with that program of sex ed, but I listened to the fact that we need to do a better job on outreach.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That's a really good example.
Yeah.
That everyone?
Yep.
Let's switch gears a little bit from to the election.
Yeah.
Coming up. From your perspective, what do you think the most dire issue is facing Santa Barbara?
Oh, I mean, definitely housing, and with that is homelessness, but housing for sure, and the rates and just how incredibly expensive it is to live here. Poverty is my issue that I work on in my day job and care about and think about. We have the third highest rate of poverty in this county in the whole state of California. I say that. It's one of the reasons why I've run for offices, because there's so many things that we could be doing, even just awareness of that. So I would put that in kind of the broad category of how many people are living in poverty and can't afford housing and therefore might be homeless. We have 13% of our public schools in this county, our children are homeless. So this is a real issue, but we don't on State Street. But there are so many people, families who, kids go to school and they're living in cars, or they're bouncing around from, relative to relative, and they don't have a stable environment for their children.
Dare I ask you if you are endorsing anyone?
Well, for mayor, I watched the debate. I was really happy about that. I have such respect for the 4 main candidates. I don't really know the other 2 that just joined, but I'm like a lot of people that I know. I haven't landed squarely in one camp yet, and I'm looking for signals as to where to go. I'm really excited about James Joyce right now. I thought he did excellent at the debate. I've known him for a while. He's close with my brother and serves on the board of the Common Table Foundation. Have a lot of respect, and I just was happy to hear some specifics, especially around a passion of mine, which is ethics reform and taking special interest especially out of our local government. I'm also supportive of Deborah Schwartz, who was really close with me when I ran for supervisor, gave me a lot of support, and has just been doing yeoman's work on that planning commission for 12 years. I mean, really knows the ins and outs and is smart as a whip. So those are my 2 candidates right now, but I obviously want to narrow it to 1 and get fully back in behind 1, and we'll just see how this goes. I'm really focused on Kristen Sneddon, my city council person in District 4, and in fact, we're launching her campaign at my mom and I at her house tonight, my mom's house. So that's the campaign I'm most involved in on a daily basis, and really am excited about her candidacy.
What about her candidacy makes you want to support her?
She's just such a good person, and it takes more than that to be an effective city council person, but I think she has been effective. A couple things. First of all, I don't know if people necessarily might not know how she got involved, but she and I went to high school together. We didn't know each other too well, but we did. And then I heard back up from her when she was inspired in 2017 after Trump was elected, and there was the Women's March, as you remember, and then there was the March for Science. And she went to a March for Science, and here she is, a geologist, a water scientist, and she said, I should do this. And I just love that about her, and about the ability for local politics to take in somebody like that. And she kind of came from behind and surprised people. And I love that she's an educator on the city council. She's a mom, her kids are in school. It's just, kind of in my zone of what we're doing every day, of the balancing act. And I just think what she's focused on in terms of climate resiliency and wildfire protection, and the fact she has the support of people like Pat McElroy, who really know the ins and outs of that, speaks volumes to me. So, but fundamentally, I just am, you know, proud that she's a friend, and I really trust her ethics. And I've seen, I'm going on and on about her, you can tell, but I've seen her constituent service in action, and that takes a lot of time and thoughtfulness, and she's really good at it.
Fantastic. That's a great.
Yeah.
Amazing. How would you encourage most everyday people to get involved in local politics? What do you think is the easiest entry point?
Well, the easiest is voting. Oh my gosh, we have to vote on this recall and vote no, if you're asking my opinion. We need to keep, especially during COVID, we have to keep our governor in place. So voting is the easiest, and that's, I say that because a lot of people still don't vote. But then, you know, just another way to get involved, this isn't the easiest, but we have so many awesome nonprofits here in town. As you know, what's the statistic, like the most per capita in all of the country or something like that. Volunteering at a nonprofit, serving on a board or showing up at an event is a great entry way into Santa Barbara local politics and policy. That's what I did when I first moved back to town, my hometown. And so I would just, you know, pick an issue that you like. A few that I love are Planned Parenthood and also the Community Environmental Council, and both of which have a lot of community engagement. A lot of events, obviously during COVID, things are a bit different, but a lot of ways to engage, and you don't feel like you need to, you know, jump into running for office. Obviously that's a much bigger, higher bar, which I encourage everyone to, you know, think about. But that's, you know, a little intimidating, but a really great thing to do. And I do have a lot of respect for anybody who runs for anything. It's never as easy as it might look. So, yeah.
And finally, I wanted to get your input on specifically speaking to young women who are really looking towards their future, getting involved, possibly raising a family. You know, they want a seat at the table. You've been knee deep in a man's world in DC, in Santa Barbara. What's your advice for them? Are we still at the point where we need to, or they, not a young spring chicken anymore. Do they need to still talk louder? They need to work harder? Do they need to dress better? Or are we past that? Like, what would you say to them having lived it and where we are now?
Oh God, no, I hope not, I hope not the wardrobe part. I think they need to band together more and rely on each other more. There's so many, I just saw Starshine join. I mean, there's so many resources. There's so many women like Starshine, Rochelle, who are just, you know, such fierce advocates for women doing what they want to do and jumping in with 2 feet and giving each other whatever they need, encouragement. There's these statistics, and I've studied a lot of this in terms of why women don't run. It takes a woman, the statistic is 7 times to be asked to compare that for each other and have each other's back more. And if somebody's thinking about something, and one thing I love being in elected office is I get this question fairly, I mean, from time to time from women like, hey, I just really want to get involved, and what would you suggest? And I jump at that chance to try to give that nudge and give that encouragement and provide a little bit of a roadmap to something that's legitimately very intimidating. And it's hard. I mean, I'm the only parent of a current student on the board of the schools. I mean, my colleagues are fantastic and they've had kids, and Kate's raised a ton of kids as being a principal and teacher. So no disrespect to them, but there's a reason why it's hard to do a school board job when your children are in school, because it takes up a ton of time. And so just giving each other more encouragement and answering those questions of how do you manage it and how do you balance, because you can if you want. I mean, there's ways to do it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on. We've been watching you for years and just have nothing but admiration for everything that you do and everything that you balance. So big thank you to you.
Thank you.
And thanks.
I just want to say one more thing
Sure.
on the COVID, because I'm sort of on my soapbox about this. Masks, especially for kids, the cloth masks don't cut it when it comes to Delta. So you need to get an N95 or an N94 for your child for sure if they're sitting in class these days. So I'm trying to put that out there broadly.
That I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, it's new information. Again, cloth masks were fine for the original COVID, but now we really need to make sure our kids have, and us too, the N95s, and if they have the disposable ones, they should have a cloth mask too. So that's really important. And I'm encouraging the Santa Barbara Unified to make those N95s available in class, so that if your kid does have a cloth mask, they can swap it out when they get there. They're real cheap right now, thankfully, and they're really easy to get either at CVS or on Amazon.
Oh, I mean, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
If my kids wear the one, with Pokemon on them and whatever.
I know. Yeah. And now we got to step it up, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, we got to do what we got to do, right?
Well, thanks for what you do, and thanks for the whip, and thanks for those who joined.
Yep. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, Laura. Have a great
Good morning. Can you hear me? Hi.
So,
How are you?
I'm great. I'm sending one also to